If you've been on this channel for a while, you'll know that I've talked about different topics, like which Souls boss is the hardest, which one is the worst, and which one is the best. But I've never once talked about the easiest bosses. So today I'm gonna go over the top 15 most pathetically easiest Souls bosses ever to find out which one is truly the best punching bag. Let's start with the first entry. When it comes down to easy ass bosses, Wolnir is always on the list, and that's for a good reason. He's one of the easiest fights in the entire game of Dark Souls 3 and the Souls series in general. You would think that a giant ass skeleton towering over you in a pitch black cave or wherever the hell you're fighting him would be a super hard fight, but no, it's quite the opposite. The only thing he got going for himself is intimidation, as on a first time playthrough you can get jump scared pretty easily. So if you die to him due to panic, it's somewhat understandable. Another understandable reason why someone would die to him is the fact that he's more of a gimmick fight rather than a straight up, aim for the face until he's dead type of fight. But after his intimidation factor wears off and common sense starts to click in, you'll realize that his big ass glowing eye style golden bracelets are the obvious weak points. Attacking his bracelets will cause him to explode, and this will take out a huge chunk of his health. This right here is why he's super easy, as you only have to do this around 3 to 4 times before he's dead. Now Wolnir does have some attacks of his own, like his occasional slams, sword slashes, and his poisonous gas, but most of the time you'll kill him before even realizing his actual moveset. So yeah, Wolnir is piss easy. Throughout the whole game of Dark Souls, Gwyn was hyped up to be this elite demigod with powers and influence crazy enough to defeat great enemies like the immortal dragons. He was also able not only to conquer them but build his kingdom and usher in his new age. Throughout the game, despite how terrible things are now, we are constantly reminded of his accomplishments by certain characters or just by wandering around certain areas. So when we enter the kiln, I kinda knew that we might get to face him, and I was pretty excited. But tell me why when we finally see him, he looks like this. He looks like your local homeless man at the gas station. Okay, jokes aside, we know why he looks the way he does. He sacrificed himself to the first flame to keep the Age of Fire going, and I'm pretty sure doing so burned away most of his strength and drained his body to the point where he's a husk of his former self. But even then I think he could have been slightly more difficult. Don't get me wrong, I'm not mad, but I was just a little disappointed that he was this, easy. I mean, it took me around 30 seconds to beat him on my last playthrough, and that was without parrying as well, because apparently it's super easy to parry him. Now despite how easy he was, he is also pretty aggressive. I mean, you can barely heal around this guy without him launching himself towards you, but as long as you equip the heavy ass armor, that shouldn't be an issue. But despite how easy he was, Gwyn is still one of the best bosses in the game, mostly because of his lore, and making this fight this, easy is a great way to show the player how far he is out of his prime. Now another super easy fight is the Celestial Emissary. From the moment the fight begins, it's clear that this boss isn't designed to be much of a challenge. The first phase mostly consists of fighting a group of alien-like enemies that look and act like regular mobs you've seen before in the game. The boss itself is just one of them, slightly larger, but it doesn't stand out too much. Once you figure out which one is the emissary, the fight becomes incredibly simple. Its attacks are slow, predictable, and don't deal much damage. You can dodge or even tank most of its moves without much trouble. Even when it transforms in the second phase and it grows into a larger creature, the difficulty barely increases. Its attacks are still easy to avoid, and it moves slowly, giving you plenty of time to react or heal. But what makes this transformation even more funny is that it makes itself an easier target. The arena is also wide and open, so you don't feel trapped or overwhelmed. For most players, the hardest part of this fight is probably figuring out which enemy to focus on at the start. But once you do, it's just a matter of staying aggressive and finishing the job. Overall, the Celestial Emissary feels more like a mid-level enemy than a proper boss fight, and it's unlikely that it gave anyone much trouble. Patches is one of the most iconic Souls characters, mostly because he manages to troll you in almost all of the games, so the fact that he was a mini-boss in Elden Ring was pretty cool. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's pathetically easy. I mean, bro just gives up halfway through the fight once he starts getting his ass beat. The fight itself can be a bit tricky though, especially since his short spear tracking can be a bit odd at times. But all you have to do is just go behind him for a backstab and that's it, you should be good. To be honest, there's nothing more that needs to be said about Patches. It's just a troll fight meant to reintroduce us to our favorite piece of shit. The Witch of Hemwick. To be fair, this fight can be a bit scary on the first try, especially if you're dealing with the shadow guys. It's also kind of somewhat confusing knowing what to do during the fight on your first attempt. Since the witch is invisible and usually hides in the corner of the room, most people will think that the shadow guys are the main threat, but after figuring out the location of the witch, it gets way easier from here on. as she barely has any attacks to defend herself, and with enough stamina you can stun lock her for a while. Now, despite how small her arsenal is, the witch does have some attacks that you need to still watch out for. She will oftentimes shoot out a projectile that temporarily immobilizes you, which can lead to you taking a lot of damage if she performs her grab attack during this state. But apart from that, the hardest part of the fight is just locating where she's at. But the actual reason why people clown this fight a lot is the fact that you can go in with 0 insights, and this will prevent the Shadow Men from spawning, making the fight way easier than it already is. I remember watching the dope ass cinematic trailer for the Demon Souls remake years ago and thought it was pretty cool. But what stood out to me the most in the trailer was this. Seeing this giant behemoth of a dragon made me pretty excited to fight it. At this point, I've never played the original Demon Souls, so all of this was somewhat new to me. After progressing through the game and defeating the Flame Lurker, I finally encountered the Dragon God. However, something is off. Yep, it turned out to be a fucking gimmick fight. This is a massive letdown, especially after hyping it up like that in the trailers and even in the beginning. This whole fight is a glorified stealth section. You have to hide behind the columns while the dragon isn't looking and make your way down to each ballista. There are 3 of them in the arena and they all do a massive amount of damage to the boss. Now, why the hell is the dragon not aware of the 3 big ass ballistas pointed directly at him? Look, that is something we'll never know. But anyways, after using all 3 of them, the dragon will be knocked out. Now all you have to do is make your way down and attack its chin until it's dead. And that's it. That's literally the whole fight. Look, I'm not mad that it was easy. No, I'm just disappointed that the fight was just, terrible. At least the Storm King, while easy, was still cool due to how much of a spectacle it was. If they did the same thing with the Dragon God, it would have made the boss fight more memorable. But instead, we got this bullshit. At first glance, the Ancient Wyvern may seem like a formidable boss. I mean, it's literally a dragon-like enemy. It has to put up somewhat of a fight, right? Well, wrong. It's laughably easy. Now, I know a lot of people hate this fight. Personally, I don't because I think it's a little bit funny. The boss itself can be hard if you choose to fight it without doing the plunge, but I don't have the mental patience to do all of that. Instead, the optimal way to defeat it is to progress through the level and run past all the enemies, until you get to this part and you perform a plunge, one-shotting the boss instantly. And that's it. The only somewhat challenging part is literally getting past the enemies, but apart from that, the fight is laughably easy. Dark Souls 2 has its fair share of easy boss fights, and the Last Giant is a prime example. As the first boss most players encounter, it's not surprising that it's fairly simple, but it's still a major pushover. The fight starts with the giant stomping around like an idiot trying to crush you. Its attacks are slow and predictable, making it easy to dodge even if you're new to the game. You can stick close to its ankles and deal consistent damage while avoiding most of its moves. In the second phase, the giant does something dramatic. It rips off its own arms to use as a weapon. While this sounds intimidating, it actually makes the fight even easier. Without the frequent stomps from its first phase, the giant becomes more predictable and sluggish. You get plenty of opportunities to recover, heal, or just keep poking away at its legs until, it eventually dies. The arena is wide enough to give you lots of room to maneuver, so even if you're struggling, you can easily reposition yourself. Overall, the Last Giant feels less like a proper boss and more like an oversized enemy meant to ease you into the game. It's not memorable or challenging, but it gets the job done as an introduction. Maiden Astray is another pushover, more so than the previous guys I've mentioned. The funniest part about the fight is that she doesn't even fight back. I guess her way of fighting is to literally guilt trip you into feeling bad. When you enter her arena, you're faced with her loyal bodyguard Garl Vinland, who does all the fighting for her. Garl is a tough opponent if you are unprepared, but due to his inability to chase past a certain point, it makes it easy to abuse him. But once you defeat him, the fight is basically over. Estrella doesn't even attack or defend for herself. She simply stays in place surrounded by a poisonous swamp, quietly waiting for you to approach her. The poison can be a mild annoyance if you step into it, but you can easily avoid it by just sticking to the dry paths. Once Vinland is gone, you can walk right up to her and deliver the final blow. The encounter is more about the story and emotions rather than an actual gameplay challenge. It's an easy fight mechanically, but the moral weight of defeating Estrella might stick with you long after. Another super easy boss from Dark Souls 2 is Prowling Magus and Congregation. Can you even call this a boss fight? It's literally just a bunch of mobs thrown into a room. At least with the Celestial Emissary, one of them grew big enough to make it look more unique, but these guys are just bland and forgettably easy. Covetous Demon is so easy to the point where I don't even have that much to say about him. He's just there. His moveset is clearly lacking as all he does is flop his big self all over the place and try to bite you. His health pool is small as in a couple of hits he's already dead, His mobility is almost non-existent, and yeah, that's it. He's painfully easy. Not that I hate it though, as I think having easy ass boss fights like this adds a certain level of charm to the game. And to be honest with you, he unironically became one of my favorite bosses in the entire game. Kind of. Pinwheel, Pinwheel, Pinwheel. The poster boy of pathetically easy boss fights. Most players joke about how weak he is, and for a good reason. He goes down incredibly quickly, often before he even gets a chance to do much, and I'm pretty sure the footage that I'm showing shows he's already dead before I finish this sentence. The fight takes place in a small crypt with airy books and candles, which sets the stage for something creepy and challenging, but the actual boss itself is a letdown. Pinwheel's main gimmick is creating clones of himself to confuse you, but this hardly matters. The clones have low health and don't do much damage, and the real Pinwheel is just as fragile. Most players can defeat him in a matter of seconds with a strong weapon or a few spells. His attacks are slow and easy to dodge, and even if you get hit, the damage is minimal. The arena is spacious enough to give you enough room to reposition yourself, but chances are you won't even have to do all of that. The only real challenge with Pinwheel is getting to the fight in the first place, as the catacombs can be a tricky area in the early game. Once you're there though, Pinwheel is little more than a speed bump on your journey. I know it seems a bit unfair to put Soldier of Godric here since he's an optional tutorial boss, but at the same time, he's still a boss at the end of the day, so who cares? Anyway, Soldier of Godric is a pushover, but he's one that I respect, since he's basically there to help the players who never played the previous games to understand the basic combat mechanics. From the moment you step into the arena, it's clear that he isn't going to put up much of a fight. His attacks are slow, heavily telegraphed, and leave huge openings for counterattacks. Whether you block, dodge, or just stand there trading hits, it's almost impossible to lose to him. Even his damage output is laughably low, so you can afford to make several mistakes without worrying about dying. In the grand scheme of things, Soldier of Godric is more of a warm-up than a boss fight. He's there to build your confidence and get you comfortable with combat before getting your anus ripped out by the tree sentinel. Still, it's not hard to laugh at how pitifully weak he is. Here we have True King Allant. Damn, this list keeps getting sadder and sadder. At least the previous guys turned into memes, but the True King has been forgotten. True King Allant is similar to Gwyn in the sense that lore-wise, they were the most powerful in their respected verse, but a great sacrifice caused their power to wither away, leaving them a husk of their former self, both again in power and appearance. But at least Gwyn didn't end up looking like mutated hemorrhoids. And in terms of actual combat, Gwyn puts up more of a challenge than Allant. It's definitely hard to call this a fight, it's more of a lore dump. I mean, all bro does is yap while pathetically trying to attack you. This is just straight up sad, and after a few hits, he's dead. His role in the story is more of a revelation than a challenge. It's to show you that the previous guy you fought wasn't the actual king, and this one is the real deal. But man, he's still a pushover. Now, the most pathetically easiest boss in the Soul series in my opinion is the Mist Noble. It feels more like a glorified punching bag rather than an actual fight. The encounter is short, simple, and barely even worth mentioning compared to the game's other much harder bosses. When you approach the Mist Noble's arena, it seems like he's gonna be an issue. I mean, you see him just standing there menacingly, doing almost nothing as you walk up. But as soon as you start wailing on him, that's when you know he's not gonna put up a fight at all. If you're aggressive, you can take him down in seconds before he even has a chance to attack. Even if it does manage to get a hit in, its attacks were weak and slow, making them easy to block or dodge. The game doesn't even treat him like a big deal. There's no dramatic build-up or intense arena, just a super easy boss. Overall, the Mist Noble is more of a joke than a boss. It's over so quickly that it barely leaves an impression. So that was it for the easiest Souls bosses ever. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree with the list, and let me know some other ones that deserve to mention. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have a good one.